22. If everybody please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, our agenda this evening, as it was posted on the town website and the town board, is as follows. Number 1, Silas Major Subdivision. Applicant seeks major subdivision approval to create 15 new lots on approximately 16.2 acres of land, with 14 lots being residential and 1 lot being used for stormwater management on property located on the east side of Cole Lane. Jim Silas is the applicant. Number 2, Cooper's Trail, waiver of subdivision. Applicant seeks a lot line adjustment to the transfer of approximately 0.5 acres from one parcel to the adjacent parcel located at 32 Indian Creek Road. Cooper's Trail Corporation is the applicant. And number 3, Spano, waiver of subdivision. Applicant seeks to subdivide approximately 2,600 square feet from 5 Tarbell Avenue and transfer it to adjacent property at 445 Hoosick Road, Park. Spano is the applicant. We have some new business also, and some review of zoning regulations. So with that being said, the first thing on our regular agenda is the review and approval of the minutes from May 19th. Everybody had an opportunity to look at those. Are there any corrections, comments, or additions? Okay, hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the minutes as they were submitted. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, first on our agenda is Silas Major Subdivision.
There.
Are they here?
No, Russ gave me a call. He asked to be extended out to the first meeting in July. So that would be July 7th. Russ stated that Mr. Vera was still working on the stormwater plan with Bill Bradley.
Okay. Number 2 on our agenda is the Cooper's Trail waiver of subdivision.
Unfortunately, that can't be acted upon because there is a stop work order on that property. And I believe it's the prohibition of, or I forget what the exact name of the law and the zoning law, but you can't act upon something that has a violation on it, a parcel that has a violation on it. So unfortunately, we'll have to get the parcel cleared up with the violation prior to hearing the waiver.
I noticed Mr. Paulson's in the audience. Were you aware of that?
Aware of.
That we can't act on that because there's a stop work order on the property?
I did talk to Chuck just a couple hours ago. He called me about 3 hours ago and said almost the same thing he said now, but such short notice, it's a bit of a surprise after making the application and being at the first meeting. I sure would appreciate if the planning board would hear it. I've acknowledged the stop work order, I'm aware of it. And I don't believe anything within this lot line adjustment would affect that stop work order. And just getting it last minute is kind of surprising too, so I'd like to learn more about why. If there's a specific law or could help you learn what that is, that would be helpful.
I'm
I'd also like to learn if the planning board would hear it as well.
just as a point of interest, I found out about 3 hours ago.
Okay.
So this is news to me, I'm sure it's news to this board. So I'm gonna have Attorney Gilchrist explain exactly in a little bit more detail what's going on here for you and the benefit of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, it's my understanding that the lot from which the 30-foot strip is being proposed to be divided from does have the pending stop work order on it, that's the same lot. And so there's a provision in the zoning law, it's section 160-8, effect of existing violations. In relevant part, it does read, no subdivision, site plan, or special use permit application shall be reviewed or acted upon for any premises upon which there is an existing violation of this chapter or any related town, county, or state regulation governing building, construction, development, or use of land, buildings, or structures within the town. And unfortunately, that there's no waiver, if you will, provision in that. It's a direct prohibition on review or action by the planning board on property, an application concerning property if there's a pending violation on that property. So to divest the board of authority to act on that. So the first order of business is just get the stop work order issue addressed, and then the board can resume its review of the waiver application.
Any questions on that? I mean,
Yes.
we can't act on it on the planning board point of view.
I guess I don't understand what a waiver is. When we met the last time, we talked that this was a lot line adjustment. We're not subdividing off any pieces to create separate lots. We're just taking one property line and moving it 30 feet. And we phrase that as a lot line adjustment. And so as Mr. Gilchrist read it, I'm not, and forgive me because I don't have it in front of me as well, Mr. Gilchrist, but we're not subdividing anything, so I'm not sure that. And I don't know the definition of subdivision either, so.
Yeah, we're going to pull that out so we can step through that too. I likewise did not bring my full subdivision regs, but I'll get a copy of those. Anybody have those? I see when, oh, they're coming at me. So. First, we were just talking about this with Mr. Einstein before the meeting started. The Brunswick zoning, strike that, the subdivision regulations don't have the term lot line adjustment. They don't have a provision for a lot line adjustment in the town code. So what the planning board does is address those through Article 3, application for waiver of requirements of subdivision regulations. Okay. And in there, if you read that, the request for the waiver, and I'm reading from Article 3, Section 1, Sub A, request for waiver. Any owner of land may, prior to subdividing or re-subdividing land, apply to the planning board for a waiver of the application of the town subdivision regulations to the proposed subdivision upon the ground that their application is not required. They do use the term subdivision or re-subdivision in the absence of any provision that specifically addresses a lot line. When it says it's a waiver of the regulations, it is technically under the Brunswick Code still a subdivision, but the board has the authority to waive certain requirements associated with a subdivision application, like all of the requirements for a minor subdivision. And so I think read together, it is a type of subdivision, And if there had been a provision for a lot line adjustment, that would make it clearer, but in Brunswick, unfortunately, it's not. We have to apply the code as written. And so that's certainly, the building department has reviewed that, and I don't disagree with that approach. That's all.
Would there be any harm in letting the second reading of this go and reviewing the lot line adjustment?
But the harm would be the board would be acting, the planning board would be acting in contravention of the town zoning. That's all. And I certainly can't advise the board to act in a manner inconsistent with the town code. So resolving the outstanding violation, first order of business, and then proceed with the waiver application.
Okay. And when you resolve that issue, you go back and Chuck will get you on the agenda. We'll address it when it's appropriate time. So right now, we can't do anything. So we'll take care of business on the other end there and come back to us and we'll take care. This is, we call lot line adjustments, but generally they don't require a lot of detail and so forth and so on. Generally are fairly easy to move forward. So this appears to be one of those cases. When you come back to us, I don't anticipate too much of an issue. But, not going to guarantee that. When you get the resolve with the stop work order and the citation, just contact the office again and get back on our schedule. All right? Okay. So you would be adjourned with no date at this point. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that before we go to our next item? Our third item on our agenda is Soprano Waiver of Subdivision. Is there somebody here for that?
I am.
You're here for that. I thought you were just coming to.
I like to come on occasion.
Okay.
Old timers day.
Okay.
My name is Paul Inkster. I'm here on behalf of, actually both parties. My client that I represent is Dominic Maselli, who owns property on Hoosick Road at 445, I believe, Hoosick. And that is what used to be the old Hassan Ford repair shop. It's the block building on top of the hill, which is now what's the word I'm looking for?
Detail shop.
shop. And he rents it out to somebody that does that. In back of that, on 5 Tarbell, is a gentleman by the name of Mark Schifano, who owns that lot. That is an existing lot of a little over 11,000 square feet. When the zoning ordinance was changed, the minimum lot size in that zone, it's zone commercial, is 15,000 square feet. So upon the commencement of the new zoning ordinance, he was a pre-existing non-conforming lot size under the required lot size of 15,000. And what the genesis of this is that Mr. Maselli has a deed which is in conflict with Mr. Schifano's deed, who recently purchased this property, 5 Tarbell, in that Mr. Maselli's deed seems to indicate that he owns a portion of Mr. Schifano's property. So the parties got together and decided that Mr. Maselli would purchase approximately 2,600 square feet of the existing 11,000, which would thereby reduce the 11,000 to a even smaller pre-existing non-conforming lot. And I filed the application for a waiver of the compliance with the subdivision rules in April, at which time I was required to go to the zoning board and get a variance to make it an approved variance for the undersized lot. And that happened in April. I have the variance was granted, and now I'm back before the planning board to ask for a waiver of compliance with subdivision requirements. I think that's everything. There's no intended use of the property except to clean it up. And Mr. Schifano has sufficient room on the remaining portion of his lot to have his side yard as he had it before.
Anybody have any questions? Dave? I don't have any other, but do you have any questions?
I'm just curious, what does that make Maselli's lot size, that additional?
Well, I don't know off the top of my head, but it looks like it is 40 feet on the front and 100.44 feet on the side. And then 40 feet on the rear, and it's someplace in the existing Schifano lot as we have shown on the survey.
So that would be a pre-existing non-conforming lot as well.
Yes, yeah, I'm afraid virtually all of them are, unless we start putting them together. Mr. Maselli does own additional property to the, always get this to the west, heading towards Troy. And so I don't know what that total is, but he has that, what used to be the Maselli delicatessen.
Just a matter of information, that's all.
But it makes Stefano's lot less than 9,000 square feet.
It goes from 11,020, I believe is, my application has it. It's going from 11,000.
1,021 square feet.
21 to 8,000.
8,417.
8,417. Which basically is a continuation of a pre-existing non-conforming lot size.
Right, I can confirm, right, that Mr. Angster did appear in front of the zoning board, subject to a public hearing. It was treated as an area variance because the existing substandard lot was going to be further reduced in size, making it, in essence, further non-conforming. The zoning board did review that and did grant the area variance for the 2,600 square feet reduction to 5 Tarbell. Obviously subject to action by this board on the waiver. And so it's properly in front of you for consideration of a lot line adjustment. It will further reduce 5 Tarbell, but in a manner that the zoning board has allowed pursuant to the area variance.
Does anybody have any questions on this? Does anybody have any problems with proceeding ahead? Okay, then I will entertain a motion of seeker determination.
I'll make a motion.
Do you have a second?
Second.
I assume this is a negative declaration.
Yeah.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now on the waiver of subdivision, who will make that? Anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
To approve the, is there any conditions that have to be?
The only one I see is that the 2,600 square feet be merged into the Maselli lot, so it doesn't become its own lot. It will be merged in and become part of the lot at 445.
I'm gonna do a deed. Dorothy Tischler represents Shafano for the actual transfer. So I'll do a deed from Shafano to Maselli and then do a merger of Maselli's new lot with his existing lot.
Yeah.
I'll do simultaneous.
You bet. And then just file a copy of that merger deed with
Right.
We have a motion on the floor, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Paul, you're all set.
Thank you very much. Good to see everyone.
You,
Do we need those?
Thanks.
I guess I can collect them and stamp those?
Yep.
Paul, you have a copy?
Okay, that concludes our regular agenda. We have some new business. This is actually old new business. At our last meeting, we were presented with an application of waiver of subdivision from Vincent Santora. And this was in connection with the property up on Old Mountain Road. And there was a question of whether this waiver could be allowed because this property had been subdivided several times from 2017 to 2019. So the 7-year rule was a problem. So that we couldn't act on this. However, the applicant now wants to look at this as far as a regular subdivision, either a minor or a major. So we'd like to get into some discussion about that. There is an issue here that this is a new owner of the property. It is not sort of indirectly part of the old subdivision. However, I believe that was stated in our last meeting that the waiver of subdivision applies to the original subdivision of the property and not by the owner. Is that correct? New owner?
Correct. One of the considerations is, this is a new owner of what I'll call the remainder parcel, the large remainder parcel from the prior waiver of subdivision review. So it's a new owner. It's my understanding he's seeking to divide building lot from the remainder lots. So one of the considerations for the board is, while the waiver regulations certainly say, one of the considerations is, has the property been subject to a waiver within the last 7 years? the next inquiry, if the answer is yes, the next inquiry is, Russ has said is, well, okay, then it requires a subdivision application. Is it a minor or a major? This would, as I understand it, subject to confirmation, this would create a fifth lot out of what was the parent parcel under the town subdivision regulations. That would be a major. So one of the factors for the board to consider is the current owner has only owned one lot, the remainder lot. And he's looking to create one new building lot, which from the new owner's perspective would be 2 lots. So certainly the prior subdivision history, the waiver history is relevant as to whether it should be reviewed as a waiver. But the current applicant, the current owner, has only been the owner of one parcel, which was the remainder parcel, and is now seeking to basically submit a 2-lot subdivision. So those are all relevant factors as to whether this board and the building department determines it's an appropriate minor subdivision application, or should the town look collectively and say, well, this would be a total of a 5th lot. It is a relevant issue in my opinion that it's a new owner, and the owner of the remainder lot is seeking to create only one building.
That being said, I would like to point out that the obvious difference between having a minor subdivision and major subdivision is considerable amount of money that the owner would have to put forth for a major subdivision, plus a lot more paperwork and drawings and management, all that kind of stuff. A minor does kind of reduce that a little bit, the impact of that, in addition to impacting the cost, obviously. There is probably a considerable amount of less work. I do agree with Andy on the new owner. Certainly it doesn't, the parcel itself doesn't qualify for a waiver, but I believe that since it's a new owner and there's only 2 lots being created, that we could consider this as a minor subdivision, and an application could be filed as a minor application. So, any thoughts on that?
Is this the 5th or 6th lot? Chuck,
Should be 5th, right?
I thought you said in what you sent out, it was the 6th lot.
I don't know what I sent out because I haven't been in the
You
office
sent
all
out,
week.
you sent out an email that said, so if you look at in total, counting the remaining parcels, it would be 6. So it would be a major subdivision.
Counted the remaining parcel.
No, you always count the remaining parcel.
Originally, there was a waiver breaking off 5.2 acres for the house
Right.
from the 105 acre parcel. Then there was in 2019, there was a minor 4-lot subdivision, split three lots off the other, on the other side of the
That
road.
was across the road, yeah.
So, in addition to the,
1, 2, 3.
so this would be a 6th lot. Do we have that
There's a
right?
3 on this thing.
Yeah, it is. 1, 2.
Well, I got 7, son.
The remaining 94 acres, there's no home in that?
Well, that's under the new owner bought that, that's the major.
That's what he's breaking off the 94 then.
It's breaking 5 off of 94,
Gotcha.
or 5 off of 100.
So he's creating 2 lots,
99.
additional ones, so. My count is 6. Maybe wrong.
This is here.
So there's a minor across the street, that's 3. That left 2 on the other side. Because they did a waiver. We have another lot, that's 6.
Does everybody agree with that count?
It's separated by Long Mountain Road, right?
The minor, the 3-lot minor. Yeah, it's on the other side of the road.
We don't do that in Brunswick. though.
That lot that's to the,
We don't do subdivision by highway or whatever it is. they call it.
No.
the Richardson lot and the lot above Richardson to the northeast, is that part of the subdivision too?
I think so, yeah.
So it's seven.
What's this one?
But I don't know if this one was part of the original dividing it, whether that was always there.
That's two here. Seven.
Is it 7, 6 or 7?
Is that 7? What's that one?
That's owned by whoever that gentleman is, Jeremiah. Before, right, yeah, that was,
6, this would be 7.
So it's easy.
Yeah, so it's right in the house on that.
Keep it right away.
This is big, 400 feet. I think this subdivision, this lot, for the 5.05 acres, is a 7th lot.
to get 7.
Well, it depends on when this one is done.
Well, there's a map reference for Shut Trust 2015, revised in 2017. And Shut is a parcel, but not without a property line description.
I count 6.
You got 6 now? Okay, explain that. Oh,
But-
I see 1, 2, 3 on the one side of the road. Right? Okay. There's now 6 lots and he wants to create a 7th, right?
You know, that waiver lot is right there, at 505 acres.
Yeah, but what about the Richardson and the
They don't, they
Jerry?
weren't part of that. Those are separate lots.
What about the land of Shut? That's
They weren't part of that
To the east.
subdivision,
No.
original subdivision?
No,
Oh, okay.
not the recent 7, 2, and 3.
Okay.
What I don't get is,
Well, it's gotta be more than that, because that's only 5 lots. Those 2 ones.
No, there's the other
Shut.
lands
Oh,
of
Shut
Elson
lot.
Shut Irrevocable Trust. It's
Okay,
still intact.
okay, so now we all agree that this Santoro lot is of 100 and some acres, is the 5th lot. And then this will be a 6th lot.
Correct.
Okay. So we got the number correct? On the minutes?
That's fine, the sixth lot will be the sixth lot. How large is the Santoro lot currently?
99, 99.47.
99.52 acres. If the remaining area will be 94.47,
Yeah.
and the new waiver lot would be,
Where you going with Shelley?
well, the new lot would be 5.05 acres.
Check your phone.
Okay. So now that we got the correct number of lots, let's go back to how people feel about whether this should be treated as a minor subdivision with the footnote that this is a new owner of this large parcel.
I guess I don't have a problem with this being a minor, but if they came back in and tried to cut any more off, I think then it's a major.
Yeah, because they have a right of way into that 94 acre lot.
He's actually got two.
They got two.
So it is possible that somewhere down the line, they might. I mean, can we put a stipulation that we say this advances to be approved, that if additional subdivision would be treated as a major?
We can certainly reference that in the minutes, indicating, based on deliberation, given the new owner seeking one building lot, that it will be accepted as a minor. Any further subdivision from the remaining 94-acre parcel will be treated as a major.
Okay. I don't think we don't have to make a motion or anything for this. Okay. Is everybody, like a show of hands, is everybody willing to treat this as a minor subdivision and have the applicant submit an application for a minor subdivision? Any questions with that? So we can go back to this. And when you get the application, you put it under new business again, review it, and then put them on the agenda. Okay? Is there any other new business? There was going to be some discussion on several solar farms. We have applications in for 3 solar farms, in addition to the ones that we have approved and are pending, which will give us right now approximately 11 solar. The new ones that we're considering is the one on Chesney Avenue Extension, the Great Beaching property, which is approximately 100 acres. There is one on Town Office Road, which is part of the Misty
Placid Farms,
Farms.
yeah, Cowboy Joe.
And then the second one is property off H Road, which I believe is that parcel that actually comes onto Route 2, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But you see
It would be just east of Hakes Road.
Would be north of the trail.
That for sale sign there.
But we have seen nothing, well, you're supposed to start discussing these under new business, but haven't seen any material or applications at this point, is that correct?
Not if they didn't come out and if they weren't part of your packet.
Okay. So just as a heads up on that.
So Brick Church Road application been,
That has been withdrawn.
That's what I was withdrawn. The one around the church there?
Yeah.
That's been withdrawn. So, now, just as a point of interest, at our next, the Atlas Renewables, one is going to be on our agenda for our next meeting. And they have a public hearing scheduled for the July 7th, 7 o'clock. At our next meeting, we also have Leon, remember the site plan, with a public hearing at 7 o'clock on the 16th of June, along with the 16th of June as right now. We have the Whitbeck minor subdivision, and we also have, once again, the Atlas Renewables coming in for progress. Okay. One of the last items that we have under new business, and I'm going to turn this meeting over to Andy at this point. Everybody received a very large wad of paper here. The town is in the process of redoing the zoning laws, basically making amendments to the zoning law that was approved in 2017. There's a cover sheet, you received a cover sheet and memorandum from the Burgers Group, who did most of the work on the previous plan, of where the amendments are. You have a rough draft, a working draft And then you have did everybody get the second one, which is one is letter size and one is legal size. So. I'll turn the meeting over to Andy.
Need one?
Yeah, well, so I know what I'm talking. Sure. Perfect.
Can't have any roosters. Can't have roosters.
Okay, so what's in front of you has been formally referred to this board by the town board. So what the town board has done is propose certain amendments to the Brunswick zoning law, which was adopted in 2017. If you look at the document that has this legal look and local law filing on front, this is the proposed local law to actually implement the proposed amendments. This needed to be referred to you because this process does include the introduction of a local law, and it's the local law that's been referred to you. So this needed to come to you, just to check off a legal requirement, okay? What the town is doing, so no one is confused here, is rather than going through a law which went section by section and just described the amendment and then acted on that, what then ends up happening is you've got the 2017 law that you then have to look at another local law to see if it's been amended, and it gets quite cumbersome. So to avoid that, this local law proposes a complete repeal and replace. So the end product will be a single contained final 2022 zoning law. However, in order to understand exactly what amendments have been proposed, you also have included in your packet this document that's labeled draft, last edit 4/19/2022. What this is the red line version of the 2017 law. You can use that to identify what the actual amendments are being proposed rather than reading through the full zoning law. This will identify where the changes are being proposed, either through strikeout, which is the language will be removed, or an underline, a red line. This is the proposed new language. LaBerge's cover memo very generally goes through what changes are being proposed, or at least goes through what the major changes. Some of these are very minor technical corrections, wordsmithing, cleaning some things up. But there's also some substantive changes, and you can use the LaBerge memo kind of as a roadmap for that when reviewing this and going through the red line version to see what the actual proposed change is. By referring this to this board, the town board has asked the planning board to review these proposed amendments and provide the town board any recommendations that this board may have, positive, negative, other ideas about these zoning amendments, so the town board can consider that when deliberating on this proposed local law. So you're aware this has also been referred to the county planning department for their review and recommendation. It has been sent to the municipalities adjoining Brunswick, so that they're aware of these proposed changes because they are adjacent to the town as a whole, and this is the entire town's zoning law. Those recommendations from the county and this board will go back to the town board for consideration. The town board has moved forward and scheduled a public hearing on these proposed zoning law changes for July. If memory serves me right, I think it was July 11, a special meeting. So what the town board has asked this board to do is take some time, review the proposed amendments, discuss them. If you have any recommendations, you have 3 meetings until the public hearing. I think the best approach would be to take this spend some time at your meeting on June 16th to discuss some of these, if anyone has any comments, recommendations. You then also have your first meeting in July to further discuss it and maybe finalize any written recommendations you might want to do and get them to the town board so they can be considered by the town board before they act on the zoning law amendments. That would be the outline. You've been given a copy of the environmental assessment form that was done in conjunction with this. Now, maybe a couple of the larger amendments, just to give some kind of substance to this. One of the big issues is a proposed elimination of the overlay districts. What the building department has found is that overlay districts as a concept in zoning, they work, they're there, but they can be a little confusing in application. The town had 2 overlay districts, the agricultural overlay and the business light overlay. What an overlay district generally does, as the name suggests, is it goes over the underlying zoning district so that the regulations in the underlying zoning district still apply, but so do those uses in the overlay. They apply. So conceptually, it just adds some additional uses within the overlay area. And Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the big issues that the building department faced after 2017, with particular regard to the agricultural overlay, was the agricultural overlay district generally followed the state certified ag districts. Well, in the town of Brunswick, there's a lot of land that are in state certified ag districts that are in residential zoning districts. And so the questions always came up, well, wait a minute, what ag uses can I do in the middle of a residential neighborhood? It became a little difficult and cumbersome. One of the options discussed was eliminate the ag overlay district, just make it a clear zoning map with discrete zoning districts. Business like overlay was changed. It's just a business, whatever it's been called, town district. Going out Route 7 east from 278, that was another overlay district that's now been changed to a highway commercial zoning district. So in those areas along that corridor, for a certain distance off the highway, it's just highway commercial. If you've got a residential use, another use that's existing there, that would continue. It would probably be grandfathered, a non-conforming use, but it will be a discrete highway commercial district. So that's one of the big changes, is the elimination of overlay districts. The other big issue which kind of started this process was the multifamily and 2-family homes. The town still has a moratorium on the review of any applications for multifamily or 2-family. And so what these amendments propose is to allow multifamily only in one zoning district, R40. And in conjunction with that, add in what's called a density calculation. Now, a little back explanation when you're reviewing that. Under the old Brunswick zoning ordinance, first adopted in the 1950s, multifamily was allowed in every zoning district in town, subject to special use permit review by the zoning board. But what the zoning ordinance did was say there's a 9,000 square foot cap per unit in a multifamily residential. So every apartment unit, when you're calculating, well, how many units can I have on my land? One unit took up 9,000 square feet. That's how it was under the old Brunswick zoning ordinance. When the 2017 local law was adopted, multifamily was allowed in certain zoning districts, but it did not carry over any density cap. So what the town is proposing to do is to put back in a density cap. It's done it through a density calculation. It's not a 9,000 square foot arbitrary number that's been proposed here. it kind of takes the current approach, which is you take a look at the property, the parcel at issue, and you take out the non-buildable land. So the steep slopes, the wetlands, any protected areas. And those come off the buildable area. And then you apply a calculation based upon what's left as to how many units. And this is proposed to apply not just to multifamily, but to subdivisions as well. So that it's more in line with, well, if you've got a 100-acre site and it's 1 acre zoning, that doesn't mean you get 100 subdivision lots. You gotta take a look at the property and say, well, okay, but what's buildable? And if you've got 20 acres of steep slopes and 20 acres of wetlands, well, those 40 acres could never really be buildable. So you pull those out, you're left with 60 acres, and then you apply a certain calculation for roads and things like that, and you're left with a buildable area of, let's say, 50 acres. Well, then that's 50 lots on 100 acres, not 100 lots. That's how a lot of municipal codes throughout the state deal with how many units you can get on a particular piece of property. The town's proposed zoning amendments would apply to subdivisions. It would apply to multifamily, number of rental units you can get on a particular parcel. Those two are kind of the big ticket items. The density calculation, the change in where multifamily housing can go in what zoning district, and also the elimination of the overlay districts. So there's a lot of cleanup items in here. It might take a little time to step through these and discuss them, but those were really the two big ticket items. The density calculation, the multifamily change, and then the elimination of the overlay districts. These are going to be your two most important documents when you're reviewing it. LaBerge's memo going through the highlights, and then the red line version where you can really just focus on what the amendments are. So there are text changes to the code, but there's also changes in the use table. There's changes in the area and bulk table, and there's changes on the zoning map. And those are all included within the red line version.
Good question, Andy.
Yeah.
The changes are indicated from the original
Yes.
document?
Yes. So this red line that's labeled draft is the 2017 zoning law, the current law, with just the changes highlighted either through the cross out or the edit text.
Is it the same version that's been on the website?
Yes. Yes. This big cumbersome one has to be done simply because at the end of this process, you want to have one single complete zoning law. But in order to understand what the amendments were, that's why the red line version is still available for the public, so they can focus on what the actual proposed amendments are.
So just as an example, I just leafed through this. I'm on page 80,
Okay? Yes,
section 160-61, expiration.
yes,
And I see things are underlined here. Is this a change?
yes. So if we look at that section as the example, everything that's in underline is proposed new text. And things that are struck, like under number 3, those are proposed to be eliminated.
Say that part again?
So if you look at 160-61,
Yeah,
letter A, the underlying language for any of the following reasons, colon, that's new language that's proposed to be included in the text. That's not there currently. And then if you look down to A3, okay, second line, you'll see the words, or if its time limit expires without renewal, and there's a line through it. That is existing language in the code that's proposed to be eliminated, to be struck.
okay.
And then if you want to compare, to really understand, well, what would it look like at the end? Take the local law, which has the proposed, what the local law does is attach the zoning law with all of these proposed changes accepted as new text. And it will be a clean version in the local law. This is provided just as your roadmap for what the changes are.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody have any other questions on that? I expect to start reviewing this at our next meeting on the 16th. So put the novel down, pick this up.
Summer reading.
And you said that the public hearing tentatively is scheduled for the 11th of July. This would be a town public hearing.
Town board.
We have this here, do you
Here,
think?
yes.
Okay. Because I remember when we did the multiple public hearings for the comprehensive plan, they were at different sites. So if we can sum up.
That may have occurred, my recollection is the public hearings for the 2017 zoning law itself were here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any other new business? I see a couple gentlemen out here, just,
I'm just observing, yeah.
Can-
I want to see how you guys work.
okay, all right.
I'll pass it ahead, Chuck.
I just didn't want to, forget something.
Electric sausage being made.
Okay, now, we're going to review our upcoming agenda. As far as our meeting tonight, Silas was postponed until the,
July 7th, he asked for.
okay.
Yeah.
Cooper's Trail has been postponed without date. Panel was approved. So there's nothing on our existing agenda right now that moves forward, except for Silas. I have for a future agenda for the 16th, it's the Leon site plan amendment with a public hearing at 7 o'clock. Number 2 is the Whitbeck minor subdivision. Number 3 is Atlas Renewables, special use permit and site plan. That is basically an update on what's going on, because they're scheduled for their public hearing on the 7th of July at 7 p.m. I don't know of anything else.
That's the Atlas Solar application is North Troy Solar.
Yes. That is the one on Merle's property in the back there towards Liberty Road. The other one has been withdrawn, just as a reminder. Is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, I thought the one that's on the.
On Oakwood Avenue, has not been officially withdrawn yet.
Oh, it has.
It's not.
Okay. Is there anything else for our next meeting that I'm missing? Andy, do you know of anything?
I do not.
Chuck, do you know of anything?
We'll look at the board when we're in the office signing, but I'm not aware of anything. I think you have it.
Whitbeck's for the town board 13, over 12 on a driveway, right?
The cul-de-sac number, yeah.
So they still have to have a public hearing?
The town board,
They're meeting about the 16
on
lots.
the number of lots, that's not subject to public hearing, that's just the town.
Right.
But the minor, yes, it still needs a public hearing. Yes.
Any other questions?
This new adjustment to our town code, is that addressed anything to do with the lot line adjustment by chance?
It did not, because this is just proposed amendments to the zoning law, which the town's got a separate chapter for subdivision regulations.
Just for curiosity's sake, what other towns treat lot line adjustments differently?
It's kind of all over the board, it's been my experience. Some have a separate procedure just for lot line adjustments?
We have a lot of lot line adjustments.
We
You
do,
would think we would have a separate procedure for that.
Was never included in the subdivision regs, and always has been done through the waiver of subdivision regulation process, but that certainly could follow. I know there are other things that the town board is considering in terms of amendments to the town code, so that could be one of them. And quite frankly, that could be part of your recommendation back, saying in addition, the board should look at a specific provision dealing with lot line adjustments.
So we have a fair amount.
I know in the past that we've talked about, when they first came through with 2017 with the new zoning laws, about the 10-day notification on public hearings. That kind of screwed us up a little bit because we had, meeting potentially
Yeah.
every 2 weeks. Has there been any consideration to go back to 7 days on that?
That was not proposed to be changed. Still 10 days.
Okay. But that was looked at?
That's a town thing, it's not a state thing,
It's a town thing. It's
so
5 days under state law.
5 days,
So,
that could
are
be.
are you saying that they looked at this and they chose not to leave it at 10 days?
I can say I don't recall as we're sitting.
Yeah, I
You
don't-
recall?
No, I don't
don't
recall the
recall
time
either.
limit being brought up at all.
The way you stated that, it would sound like, yeah, it was brought up, but we're staying with 10 days. Didn't that?
I didn't get that.
Oh, okay. I got that.
No, actually, Chuck, I think it was discussed, and I think it was decided to stay at 10.
Okay.
I really, with all due respect to this board, it doesn't affect the zoning board at all because they only meet once a month.
Yeah.
It does affect this board and it does require a little bit of more notice, but to be consistent, they thought more. My recollection is they thought adequate, sometimes 5 days is very good. And 10 days notice it gives the opportunity for the public to
On the
know
other side of the
further
coin,
evidence.
we're an unusual planning board that we meet twice a month.
There are many boards in the state that meet once a month.
Yes. So. All right. Any other questions?
How much is involved in these solar? So we got 3 new solar proposals. How much is involved as far as town law and regulations? I don't know, I have somebody from Easton they've been getting solar farms up there like crazy. And they don't seem to have any control over it. And they were asking me, we just get it after it's, put in front of us, but I didn't know how much they go through. Do we have laws on the solar farms or zoning on the solar farms or?
Yeah, so there's a section in the zoning law dealing with solar in general that goes through just personal use, if you will, the roof mounted, building mounted, ground mounted. And then it goes through major, basically commercial utility scale solar facilities. And Wayne can review them better than I can. There are requirements that need to be met in terms of complete applications, visual impact assessments, that's why you see those, that's set forth in the Brunswick zoning law, setback requirements, decommissioning requirements, all that's set forth in the zoning law.
But then there's another level that if the solar company comes in with a certain size, then it goes to the state, and then you're exempt from zoning. They're exempt from zoning, it goes to state zoning. So if it's a huge,
It's like 10 megawatts or whatever.
it's actually not huge, but if it's larger than.
I think it's 20.
Yeah, I thought the number was
If it's
20.
a 20 megawatt.
You usually see what, 5. So if you add
Right.
4 of those
5.
together, then it goes to a different.
I find that almost a little ironic, which is the bigger the project with the more potential impact on the community,
They take it away.
they take it away from the community and it's all at the state level. So, yes, Linda's right. The large scale, I mean, really large, 20 megawatt and up, there's no local review. It's all done at the state level.
And I just drove up Route 40 and saw all these, one right after another, off of Route 40, and wondered if it was one of those. You
Well,
know,
I
where they,
would think where Johnson's farm is, that's gotta be commercial, the 20 megawatt.
it's pretty good.
And there's a couple over that you can see them from 40, because when you get up on 40, you can look out.
Yeah.
That's where this person's on the planning board in Easton, and they're like, they
Yeah.
just show up, and they don't have any, they're not ready for them. Okay.
If I can take can I take 2 more minutes and explain one issue?
It's not 10 o'clock yet.
That's okay. I'll take 2 minutes, okay? This board should know there are 2 pending use variance applications in front of the zoning board for 2 large-scale solar projects that generally off Route 2 and McChesney. And they're proposed for areas that are zoned residential. And the position of many solar company applicants now is we need to site these solar facilities in locations where there's available interconnection to the existing electric utility grid. This is what the zoning board has heard. It's very nice in the town of Brunswick that these large facilities are allowed in A40. And most of the eastern part of your town, 2/3 of your town is in A40. But very little of that area has existing electric grid interconnection ability. And when we approach, this is the solar company speaking, when we approach National Grid, they say, oh, you can connect out there, but you gotta pay to upgrade the lines and upgrade a substation potentially. And the solar company has presented to the zoning board, and that will cost $1 million a mile, and it makes the project no longer economically viable. So we can't put it out there from an economic perspective. So we have to site it where the interconnection capability is. And that happens to be in a residential area or an area that's zoned residentially. And that's still pending in front of the zoning board. It's not an issue particular to Brunswick. It's coming up all over the place now. We're kind of getting into that next issue. It's not just where can they go, but where does the grid allow us to interconnect where it's not too expensive?
Well, is it possible for us to get any kind of input from National Grid or whoever the utility company is to understand where those interconnections are?
You talk with Grid and they say Brunswick is full. That's what we hear all the time. And we still have people coming to the front of the board saying they want more solar.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
then
know
they can
if it's
interconnect.
going to be a first come, first serve when they get the farms built. I'm not certain. Just Ron LaBerge and myself try to wrap our heads around that and speak with the National Grid people, and actually went back to one of the applicants and said, can you show us where it shows you have connectivity here?
Right.
Chuck, when you say it's full, what do you mean by full? You mean the grid can't support? more
It's not
power
so
than
much,
that?
it's not so much the substations, it's the transmission lines.
Yeah, there's no ability to carry the energy that's being produced in the field to get it
Yeah.
to the substation to be distributed.
And then those other fields that have already been constructed but aren't connected yet, like there's one in Pittstown on Route 7, that the whole thing is built out, but there's no meters there, which means it's not operating.
Right.
Is that, like?
I think when you get to that point, you've already been in, you've heard this phrase, you've been in the queue with National Grid, and you've paid
Okay.
as you went through the process to reserve that space. So that's part of what is already taken up and is not available for anyone else. And it's
So
not
we're
expensive.
getting maxed out, that's your target, Chuck?
Yeah.
The 3 in front of us, so we can make 11, is that what you said? 11 projects total.
Yeah,
We figured that out. 5 have been approved. 2 are in front of the zoning board. one is in front of your board. See, 3 are being proposed, or up to 11.
We have 2 of them.
Right, if Atlas has not formally withdrawn the one directly adjacent to Oakwood, that's 12. And probably more to follow.
The one on Bel Air, they got,
That's within the 5 approved, right?
and that's got a place to send the power.
They do.
I would think there wasn't enough power lines back to that to pick it up.
The key is 3-phase as well. You can't site anywhere that is not 3-phase. On the,
It's 3 phase
Plus-
in the Duncans, but I wouldn't imagine there was after that.
they have to run the lines down to that point, yeah.
Okay. Any other further discussion? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that.
Have a second? I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.